This week there is a special Torah reading called Parshat Zachor. And the word Zachor means to remember. And that word has become very popular in the Jewish lexicon. When people speak about remember, they're usually referring to the Holocaust. And that's really connected to the Torah reading this week. We're supposed to remember specifically what the nation of Amalek did to the Jews when we came out of Egypt, when we were weak, and there were stragglers on the road, and they launched an attack for seemingly no obvious reason. There was no war going on between the two peoples. And the explanation that the rabbis give is that this was because of they are Amalek. And it bothered them very much that the Jews had triumphed over the Egyptians and had managed to escape from Egypt, which no other nation had ever done. And they did all of this in the name of God. And that bothered them very much because they sensed that the Jews were going to rise to a certain level and become a major influence in the world, which would be a threat to Amalek. Amalek operated with a different philosophy, and that is the negation of God and the assertion of man as being the highest creature on earth who has the right to decide all types of matters of life and death and to impose that ideology on others. The nation of Amalek has been a feature throughout all of history. In fact, that's the idea of the story of Purim, as the rabbis say, that Haman, who wanted to destroy the Jews, was from Amalek. And the Jews were given the command to remember and to fight and to destroy, to eradicate the ideology of Amalek from the world. There won't be peace in the world as long as that ideology is triumphant. And the responsibility is with the Jews. Interestingly enough, the Jews, up until recently, the Jews were the most pacifist kind of people in the world, because of the exile. But their natural reaction to problems was not to fight, was to somehow or other try to get along with the ruling power. Okay, perhaps circumstances prevented a different approach. But now the Jews have their own land. One of the greatest miracles of history, that after 2,500 years of exile and persecution and dispersion, they'd somehow all come back, resuscitate the language, establish a booming, a thriving modern democracy. And, biggest surprise of all, a great, great army and a great air force. So they've risen to a certain level. They still have their problems, but they've risen to a certain level, and remembering what Amalek did to us is extremely important on every level, because Jews tend to forget. They tend to be very liberal and peace-loving and always prepared to believe that the other side is also interested in an accommodation, and they've been burned. They have been burned a number of times, most recently the October 7th atrocity, something which no Israeli planners contemplated and were prepared for. Failure to remember leads to passivity and leads to being in a state where you're not prepared, where you're not protected, and tragedies can happen. The Jews can never be complacent. We have, as there's a statement in the Gemara, fortunate is the person who's always concerned or scared, but that would convey the wrong meaning. I don't mean to say you should walk around shivering your whole life, but you should have a certain sense of caution. The Jews are a people who have a target on their back. There are other peoples like that, but the Jew intrinsically is in danger. He's an endangered species. And of course, his main protector is Hashem. We have to return to Hashem. We have to observe the Torah properly, become a higher level people so that we are worthy of divine providence. But in order to do that, we have to recognize the dangers that we face in this world. The Torah tells us that we can't rely on miracles. We must do our part, as we saw that Esther worked out that ingenious plan, and that God helped them. And God helped to bring her plans to fruition. On that night, the king couldn't sleep. All the events of that night, which set up the situation for the accusation that Esther made against Achashverosh, that was a result of divine providence operating in accordance with the great planning, the brilliant planning of Queen Esther. So it's very important to go to shul this Shabbos. It's very important to listen to the Torah reading of Zachor. And it's very important for Jews to internalize the lessons that, of course, we have to pray to Hashem. We have to do the mitzvahs, but we have to remember and be prepared.